This evening, this is the third in the series for the faculty development research workshops. For those who haven't been here before, this is a set of programs we're going to do over some 14 to 16 months, sort of open-ended, because as we come up with new topics, we'll add those on. We did the first two, one in October on developing a hypothesis. Last month we had one on using publicly available databases to do research. And today we're sort of going to get down into the nuts and bolts of doing a clinical trial research project here, or doing a trial involving data that requires an IRB review. Before I forget, I'm looking at the camera here. All these sessions are videotaped. Currently, they're already available on the Cooper intranet on the Cooper Research Institute website. You can view those. If you can't make a future session, you can view those there as well. You won't be able to get CME by that way, but at least they'll be there and it'll be archived, so you can get. So you don't necessarily have to take copious notes because they'll all be there. This month we're going to do something slightly different. And so instead of having a faculty member give a talk, we decided we're going to have the people that are heavily involved with getting an IRB submission into the system and through the system. And so I've asked Amy Nolan, who's our manager of the Institutional Review Board, to speak on sort of on the receiving end and what they look at for, but also from the user's perspective. I asked Christine Rickette, who's here as well, to talk about on the submission side what she puts into these submissions. And Christine is the manager for clinical research projects, and she has a number of the clinical research coordinators in the hospital system report into her. So she's a whiz-bang at doing that kind of stuff. So we have someone on the sort of user side, on the customer side, and someone on the receiving side giving this session this evening. I know they'll be open to Q&A. I don't know if during the session or ask questions. We're a small group. Obviously, when it's all done, if you have questions, please reach out. There'll be contact information on the last slide, I believe, to either Amy or her staff or Christine or me or whoever in the Research Institute, and we'll try to help you. Okay? So I'm going to turn it over to you folks.
Okay. Do you want to stand up there while I walk around? Or no? Okay.
Hello. But just stand.
I'm going to walk around. All right. Good evening. How are you? I'm Amy Nolan, and I'm the manager of the IRB here at Cooper. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how you get situated in the iMedra system, and then what it looks like to go through some of the submission process, okay? And then if you have questions as we go through, feel free to let me know. And then afterwards, towards the end, Christine's going to go over how to submit the application. So she's going to actually do a real-time run-through of the study. So in order to get iMedris access, we need you to complete some sort of training. So either the NIH certificate or the city certificate are required, which are up there. And so those are the two web addresses that you can use. Either one is sufficient. The NIH course is a much quicker course than the city course, but the city course is much more comprehensive. So we prefer that users complete the city course, but oftentimes you'll hear people say, just do the NIH course because it's much faster. When you are ready to request an account after you complete your education, then we ask that you send us your completed certificate in addition to your first and last name, your degree, and all of this information that's here on this site. We ask that this be incorporated into one email when you send it in to us so that we can keep track of the request. And if it is a user that's a non-Cooper employee, because everybody who's going to be listed on your study will need to have an iMedris account, we'll also need an IT confidentiality agreement from them so that we can also include that in their account. Once we create your account, we generally create the accounts within 24 to 48 hours from the time that we receive it. And we will send you a username and a password with the web address so that you have all of that information in one spot. And the iMedris site is at the bottom here. Okay, so when you get your iMedris account, there are a number of different resources that you can use that are in this system, in our system that we use. And there's two ways to access it. There's the operating procedures page that you can access here, or we just upgraded recently to 10.3.1, and there's this help button up at the top here that you can also utilize to access the operating procedures page. So when you first log in, this is what your screen will look like. You'll have a dashboard that you can see where you can easily access your studies, you can access your forms. There's a number of different things that you can do, and we'll talk about what some of those features are. So if you click on those, either of those locations, this is what you'll get. This is the operating procedures page. It is very busy. Our contact information, if it's being updated, it is always in that, this pointer's not working well. Right there, our contact information. So this past year we had 100% turnover in the IRB office, and we had some issues where people were trying to get in contact with the old coordinators and the old manager and the old director. People were getting frustrated, but the contact information was updated here. So if you're not getting somebody, you can either email IRB Online Help, which is at the top here, right there. That will never change. That will always go to somebody that's currently working at the IRB. Or you can look at this contact information sheet, which is updated. Okay. So while there is a lot of information here, there are certain resources that we encourage people to utilize the most. And so if I break it down, so I broke this down from this larger screen here, and most of the pieces that you can use are down here and even lower than that. Okay, so the how to submit a new protocol to the IRB, this document is very lengthy, but it gives you a very good explanation of how to go through all of the steps. So I would encourage you to use this until at least your first or second time, until you get familiar with the process. This is also something that's good if you're serving as a mentor to use to give to your residents, your fellows, if it's their first time submitting to the IRB, to have them use it as a checklist to go through and complete the process. I also have on here some information about performance improvement, how to determine if something's PI or research. So I know that that's been a big topic lately. And so there's different cases where some things may not be research, and so the IRB only reviews human subjects research, and we'll talk about what that is on the next slide or so. But if you wanted to look at the information that we've provided about the difference between PI versus research, you can certainly use those two documents that are there next to that second arrow. And then towards the bottom, our third arrow down, there's consent form templates. So we have the combined consent form and HIPAA authorization for minimal risk studies. And then there's some other templates, but for the most part, I mean, if you're doing an expedited type of research study that's minimal risk, that would be the one that you can use. And then the other two that are just underneath of that are for our greater than minimal risk studies, for those that involve substituted consent or without substituted consent. And then the last two arrows are our templates. So for investigator-initiated research, we encourage you, as you're putting your studies together, to utilize, use a Word document to start thinking about what your research ideas are, so that you can have time to work with it. You're not putting it directly into the iMedris system. We've had people where they have tried to directly input information into the iMedris system. Sometimes it will time out, and then you lose your information. So we encourage you to use a Word document. There is this template here. There's one for just a database study, and then there's one for something that's not a database study. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, because we have those two forms are what the IRB uses, but I know Christine has one that she developed on her own that she uses and encourages her investigators that she works with to utilize. So we talked a little bit about performance improvement versus research. So this is the definition of human subjects research. So there are some cases where there may be human subjects involved, or there may just be research involved, but what we really need is to have those two things come together to have it be human subjects research, which would then require IRB review, okay? So we need it to be a systematic investigation designed to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge and include persons that are living, right? So sometimes we get questions about people who are deceased. That's not actually considered to be human subjects research. They need to be living, and there needs to be interaction with them either through intervention or observation or some other type of interaction with those subjects, or using their identifiable information, okay? So if those things are part of the project that you're working to create, then you're going to need to come through the IRB office. Sometimes there are gray areas where it might fall into PI, might not necessarily be research. That does not need to come to the IRB. We've been utilizing, there's a team that is looking at that type of work. Dr. Post, Ernie Post, and Crystal Hunter, who's here today. And those two are reviewing any of the PI, QI, QA type of work. Okay? So if you have any questions about that, then you can talk to them. They have been drafting letters for those people who are engaging in, who are engaging in PI. Okay? If you have questions, you can certainly reach out to the IRB, or you can directly contact Ernie and Crystal. Okay, so here's the life cycle of a project. So, you know, sometimes we don't always find funding, but it's ideal if we can find funding. And then once you find your funding, you want to start to think about what your proposal is going to look like. And that's when we encourage you to use the Word document. Put together that Word document, think about what your hypothesis is, what the purpose is, what the design is, what your methods and procedures are going to be, what that inclusion-exclusion criteria is going to be, and how you're going to carry that project out, how you're going to do your analysis at the end, all of those different types of things. And that's outlined in that template that I showed you on the operating procedures page. Once you develop your proposal, you have it in a Word document, I encourage you to have somebody review that work. Because I know that myself, when I create something, I read it, and I think, this is perfect, right? It might not necessarily make sense to somebody else, or you might have missed some in some location where it's not consistent. So I encourage you to have somebody just do a quick proofread to make sure that it flows, and before you start spending a lot of the time putting it into the iMeasure system. So then you can go on and you can route and submit the proposal. You can, from your Word document, you can copy your text and place it right into the iMeasure system, the study application, which we'll go over a little bit later on today. The templates that we encourage people to use line up very much with the iMeasure system, so that's helpful for you to have that all right there, and it will help you get through the iMeasure system much quicker. So then you're going to work to set up your project. You're going to manage your project, which we're going to talk about what that looks like after you've received approval. And then you want to make sure that at the end you want to close out your project so that it's not sitting out open and you're getting notifications or the IRB is questioning you about what's going on with the project. Okay. So if we talked about our protocol templates, we talked about how important these are. This is really the heart of the submission. And I showed you those two templates on the operating procedures page. And then there's also a Word document that Christine developed that's on the portal. So you can access that by going to Departments, Cooper Research Institute, and it's under the Coordinator Resources. Again, here's some of the things that you want to think about as you put together your Word document, as you start to think about what your research is going to look like. You want to develop your research question and think about what literature is out there to support your research question, or what are some areas that are lacking that you want to investigate more about. You want to operationalize that process and then start to collect your data once you have IRB approval and do your analysis. So there's three types of review. There's full board, there's expedited, and there's exempt. Full board review is for research that is greater than minimal risk. Expedited review is no greater than minimal risk. and exempt is less than minimal risk. So we ask in your study application to identify which level of risk you identify your research as. The IRB does make the final determination as to what type of review it will receive because there are certain regulatory categories that we need to comply with and make sure that we're in line with. Sometimes when we're sort of on the fence with certain things, we will bump it up to a higher review. It just means that we're going to have an extra set of eyes looking at it, and what we can do is we can actually bump that back down if we decide that it can be reviewed at a lower level. And we'll talk about what the review process looks like for each of those different categories as we go through. So as you start to think about what your research is going to look like, you develop your hypothesis, your purpose, your design, all that good stuff, then you can go into iMeasures and start to work through the study application or the submission process. So to do that, you would log on, and this is basically what your main screen looks like. And you would click Add a New Study, right there, that first arrow. And that will take you to your study application that you can copy from the information that's in your Word document and paste it right into iMeasures. And Christine will show you, she'll go through each of those different steps, what that form looks like, so that you can see all the different types of questions that are asked in that form. While we're still on this page, I want to point out here, this second arrow here, where it says below are your incomplete study tasks. So we recently had an upgrade, like I said, and this is where you'll find any of the tasks that you need to complete. So if you need to sign off on a submission, if you have any continuing reviews that are due, if anybody's routed anything else to you for sign-offs, like financial disclosures, which we'll talk a little bit about as we go through this presentation, this is where you're going to find your assigned tasks. So it's right on your dashboard as soon as you log in. And to access your tasks, you just click on the little arrows, they're blue in this picture, to drop that down. So some things that you want to remember as you're creating your initial review submission form is you want to click and save and continue all the way through your study application. So the study applications branch based on the answers that you provide us with. So if you go back and you change one specific question, the whole entire study application may branch differently. Some sections may end up being blank. And so it's going to get kicked back because we need to have those answers. Or the system might flag you and say, nope, these are required responses. We need you to fill this out. So as you're going through, just make sure that you're saving and continuing all the way through the study application. If there are some sections that you're still working out, you can put numbers or put some sort of fake language in there. Just remember to go back and change that once you're done. And that will allow you to go through the study application all the way without completely filling out the required courses of the required sections if you need some additional time to think about those things. So there will be locations for you to attach the different documents, like your consent forms, any of your IBs, any of your surveys or your questionnaires. Make sure that those are included and make sure that they're consistent with the study application and your standalone protocols that are available or provided to the IRB for review. And then at the end, you're going to go through the form all the way through, saving and continuing, and it will prompt you to sign and submit. So you're going to click that form. It will have you sign off as the PI. The PI is always required to sign off on the study application for it to be submitted to the IRB. And if there's other co-investigators on the study, you'll have to route it to them. You'll have to route it to the department chief. So here, so you would click on Add Reviewer, and you can type in the name of the department chief. So for example, if you had a co-investigator on your study that was in the Department of Medicine, then you would request to route that to Dr. Dillinger. And then there's some other people for pharmacy, Jackie Sutton. For lab, there's somebody different. So if you have any questions about who to route your study to, you can call the IRB office. I know sometimes We have difficulty identifying who the people are, and we have to call the medical staff office to get the updated lists. But we are glad to help you with those things. So then you would also choose the role from the drop-down menus that are on the same screen that you're working on there. And again, you're going to save and continue. Now, what will happen is these routings will go to each of the, once the PI signs off, it will go to each of the co-investigators and all of the other study personnel that's listed in the study application. And then once they're completed, then it will route to all the department chiefs. So it has an order that it reads through as it moves through the sign-offs. So sometimes people will ask, you know, we submitted our submission 3 weeks ago. How come the IRB hasn't reviewed it yet? A lot of the times it's because it's still with one of the other co-Is or one of the other department chiefs. It's getting hung up somewhere in terms of sign-offs. So you can go back in once you submit the study application to the IRB to see where that stands in terms of the sign-off process. If you need help with that, you can contact the IRB office. You can either call us or email us. For any studies that are funded, so sponsored, like pharmaceutical, federal funded, we need to have financial disclosures. Oftentimes you'll hear us refer to that as FDs. And there is a form that you can submit. This pointer is not working. There we go. So it's right there, that arrow. And those actually don't go to the IRB office. Those are cleared through the Research Institute. Barb Cruz will take a look at those. She'll identify if there's any concerns with the disclosure, and then she sends the IRB office a notification to let us know if everybody's cleared or not, and then we just manage it from that point forward. So if you were going to do your initial submission, at the time that you complete your initial submission, you route it for sign-offs, you go in and you do your financial disclosures. Just as a sidebar, if you're doing amendments, once your study is approved, if you're submitting an amendment to add additional people to the study, you're not going to be able to route the financial disclosure immediately as soon as you complete the amendment submission to add additional investigators, because they're not yet added to the study, and the IRB has to process that submission and add those people to the study. You'll get a notification from the IRB, and then the financial disclosures can be routed to those individuals. So again, I just showed you where that financial disclosure link was located in your IMEDRA system for a specific study. You add a new form by clicking on the financial disclosure, and you route it to the appropriate personnel. So everybody that's listed on the study, as long as they are anything other than a study contact, you should be routing financial disclosures to them. Chiefs are not required to submit financial disclosures. And just make sure that you fill out that box, that form, completely, and make sure that you sign off on it so it gets routed correctly. Okay, so we talked about the different types of review. We talked about expedited, full board, exempt. So when the submission is signed off, everybody is signed off on that submission, comes into the IRB. We will do a pre-screen in the IRB office before it goes out to a reviewer, and we're checking to make sure that everything's consistent across all the documents. We're making sure that all the documents are attached so that when the reviewer gets it, it's in a nice, it's all there and complete. And once we look at all of those documents and we determine that everything's there and good to go out to a reviewer, if it's a full board study, then it needs to go to the entire board. So our board is made up of 21 members at this point, clinicians, nurses, librarians, external board members who are not affiliated with Cooper, and so they will look at the entire proposal. Our board meetings are held the third Thursday of each month, and the deadline to submit to the board is at least 3 weeks prior to each of our meetings. There have been some cases where We've received many, many protocols all at once, and so we generally take up to 5 full board new protocols to a meeting. Depending on what else we have going on, sometimes we can take a 6th. So if your protocol doesn't get on an agenda, you can certainly reach out to us and ask us where your study stands. But in some cases, there are times where we've had to bump it to the next meeting because our agenda was full for that month. When you're assigned a full board, when your study is assigned to the full board, we ask that the PI come to present so that we ask for a brief summary, and then we have our board ask any additional questions that we might have about the study before we have our discussion and our motion and our vote about the specific research. If it is an expedited or exempt research study, only one member looks at that. It doesn't need to go to the board, and they're reviewed on a first-come, first-served basis. So this is a nice picture of what the flow looks like. So when you submit to us, the proposal is either approved, denied. It would need to go to a board meeting to be not approved. And then in some of the cases where the proposal needs additional work, we would send back an outcome letter to the investigator and the other study contacts that are listed in the study application and ask that specific changes be made to the proposal before we can screen it. Okay, so it would need to have revisions made and then have it be sent back to the board or back to the IRB office. So research should not begin until you actually receive your IRB approval letter from either the board or from the staff if it's just going expedited. Can't look through charts. You can't begin collecting any data or administering surveys or obtaining consent. So you want to really make sure that you have that approval, because in some cases, maybe the study needs additional changes, right? Maybe we couldn't approve it the way that it was submitted. And if you've already started to work on that, well, you didn't have IRB approval. And the study design, well, not the study design, but maybe certain criteria needed to change in order to be approved by the board. So you want to make sure that you're waiting to get that letter. And when you get if you get a stipulation letter for additional changes to be made, that you're addressing each of those stipulations as you go through the response back to the IRB. Okay. Once you get IRB approval, there are some responsibilities that you have to think about after receiving IRB approval, and that's continuing review. That they usually occur on an annual basis. There are some studies that are greater than minimal risk where we've approved them for only 8 months or 6 months. So you want to make sure that you're reading your letter to see how long your study is approved for. And at that time, once the expiration date is coming up, you'll have to submit an annual report, which we refer to as continuing review, to let us know what the progress of the study is, let us know how many subjects have been enrolled, and all of the other details that are outlined in our continuing review form. Any amendments, if you need to make any changes to your study. For example, if you need to increase your subject enrollment, an amendment will need to be submitted to the IRB prior to you enrolling any additional subjects outside of what the IRB approved in your study application. If you need to add any additional, staff to your protocol, then you want to make sure that you're putting that through before those people are actually working on the study. There's also adverse events and protocol deviations that you will need to report if there are any issues that come up. And then at the end, once you're done your research, once you've completed your data analysis, once you've written up your manuscript, it's been accepted, and you don't need to do anything else with that research, then you want to make sure that you're closing your study with the IRB. If you have residents or fellows who are working on this study and they're leaving Cooper, you want to make sure that you're pulling them off before they leave Cooper. There's also the option to transition PI ownership across to a different investigator if somebody's leaving and you want to keep that study active here at Cooper. And we can certainly work with you to help you get through that process. So when you have IRB approval for a submission, this is what your dashboard will look like for that specific study. And on the left-hand side, bottom left, you'll see I have those 3 yellow arrows there. That's where you're going to create all of your forms, any of your adverse events, your amendments, your continuing reviews, or your study closure reports. Okay? On the right-hand side, where it says outstanding submissions, not very strong, right here, this will tell you if you have a submission that is outstanding with the IRB, whether it's with the IRB to be reviewed or whether it is back on your side for corrections. That will help you keep the submissions that you have that are being worked on. You can check to see the status and where they're sitting. Okay. So that's an overview of the study application process, submitting process to the IRB. We have a lot of contacts and a lot of resources here at Cooper that you can utilize if you have any questions. The best email for the IRB is IRB Online Help. Again, like I said at the beginning, I'm Amy Nolan. I'm the IRB manager, and then we have our 2 coordinators, Katie Grant and Deborah Lopresti. We're looking to hire a 3rd coordinator, so hopefully 2017 we'll get a new coordinator. And then on the Research Institute side, we have Harry Mazurek, who's the director, and then we have Christine Rickette, who's going to show you how to navigate the study application. And then we have Crystal and John for our biostatisticians. And then we have Barb, who will do all of the billing and the contracts and the financial disclosures and everything else. Everything. Any questions? Somebody's got to have one question. All right. Yes, Barb?
For financial disclosure, when you receive funding, it's not just funding, you're also, if you get supplied from a sponsor for a study, so they're not giving you money, but say they're giving you like a caseload of Band-Aids because they want you to try their Band-Aids, that's also something that you're considering.
Funding, goods, services. Yep. Yes. Thank you. So any goods, funding, services. If it's a foundation, we don't require FDs, right? So, Cooper Foundation. So, yep. CMSRU? Yes. Yes. It is. So, it is on the left-hand side in the 3rd column down. The 3rd section down. So we have non-Cooper individual investigator agreements for non-Coopers people. And then we have the IT confidentiality agreement right here. If you need to change PIs, there's the IA, which is the second one here, the investigator assurance statement. Another thing that I wanted to add is we get questions sometimes about case reports. So if you are doing 5 or more, if you're doing a case report on 5 or more people, then we determine that to be research. If it's anything less, it doesn't need to come through the IRB. All right. So Christine's going to show you how to navigate the study application.
Me out.
Everybody pulled up? Okay. Thank you. Hello, I'm Christine Rickette. I am Manager of Clinical Projects for the Cooper Research Institute. Everybody hear me? Okay, good. So I have, I'm logged into iMendris. I made the screen bigger just so I won't have to wear my glasses. And I'm going to walk you through a study that I started to do a submission for Dr. Secand. And it turned out we didn't have the subject population, so it was a complete submission that on a study that we'll never do. So she gave her permission that we can take a look at what's already uploaded there, so you can see exactly what the application and submission looks like. So I'm going to go under here because I have her studies already loaded. Click on My Studies, and this will list all the different studies that you have. That you're on, whether you're PI or COI. So then we want to click to open it. Most of this information, this is stuff that I would cut and paste from the protocol summary or project summary that you can get in the Word version. We usually don't put any comments unless there's something you need to clarify on, then this is where you can put it just as a note to the IRB. And then we're going to save and continue. And this is the heart of the submission, which is the study application. And iMendris is slow, it likes to think. So, again, this is just, so this was a sponsored trial, so this was pulled out of the protocol that we were supplied. Oops. Along with the sponsor protocol number. So normally if it's investigator initiated, I might just put a 1 there. Study management, I tend not to use it to track subjects. I don't really know anybody who uses that feature. So it's automatically comes up as a no. Here's where you want to add your departments. Click by adding here, and if you're looking for an additional so then I typed in cardio, so it comes up with the different divisions. You would just click which one you want to add, and then oops. And then you can change the primary department down here. If this would be, the primary department would be who the PI is under. But then your co-investigators might be from anesthesia or any other divisions. They would need to be added into here. Grants is added for my people in the Cooper Research Institute. They fall under grants. Then we save and continue. And I had already populated this, but if you're going to add the PI, you just, again, click the Add User. Let me go back. You do the same thing for adding co-investigators. It will be anybody who's going to participate in the research or look at the data or have access to the data, as well as performing any study-related procedures. They need to be listed here. And then if you have support staff, whether it be study coordinator, medical students, fellows, you can add them as research support staff. A lot of times they will add Crystal, because there's different categories here. Clinical research associate, study coordinator, biostatisticians, or data managers. So you would give them a category. And add the faculty advisor that gets added if it's a medical student. We want to put who the attending physician from Cooper is that's going to be overseeing the project. Then this just leads to like an introductory. I want to put the protocol version date. If you wrote it, I would just put it the day that you're submitting. Then external investigators, there's different categories. So if they're not Cooper employees, but they're on the Cooper medical staff, like CADV would be, that they would get added there. Any Core EL people, if you're doing a project, you know, genetics or whatever with them, you would add them in that category. And then this kind of captures all the other people that are not Cooper people. Funding, that's if you have been given funds from pharmaceutical device grants, you would add that here. And then if it's internal funding, it'll come up with a listing that you can look through, and then you could just select it. Where's the, I think this is too big now. Let's see where the save and continue is, do you? I think it's too big. Do you know how to make it smaller? Let me look here. Here, let me decrease. Here. Okay. And there's the save button. Thanks. So then they're added here. And are they part of the government? Is it an NIH trial? And is anybody else here doing a study? Same study. Now here's where this routing could change under study type. So if you were doing survey, interviews, or educational tests, that would change the routing. Existing medical records would change the routing to give you an expedited category page to fill out. And normally these 3 questions are no. Does it involve normal educational practices? On the effectiveness or comparison among instructional techniques? Well, no, they've done studies on that when they do fellows projects, with the fellows being the subjects. And I've never seen one on the taste and quality of food, but I guess that they're occasionally done. Now your project information, so you want to put your proposed start date. And then say your study runs for 2 years and you're going to have a year of enrollment, then you might want to make it 3 years. Say whether or not it's FDA regulated, is it investigator initiated or sponsored, and is there a grant proposal, and the explicit locations of where the research will be performed. So we need to put, so if they're Voorhees patients or if it's Voorhees in Camden, that should be reflected here. And are you going to use LAR instead of having the subject sign? That happens a lot in critical care. This is our project summary, which I recommend that you do in Word version, and Amy did as well, because if you've ever gotten timed out after getting almost all the way to the bottom of this, it's very frustrating, and it'll only happen once. So this is where you're going to copy and paste the different sections, and this is a direct reflection of the Word version. Going through your objectives, hypothesis, the summary of the background, the significance, study design, total number of subjects, inclusion, exclusion, and those get added over here, and then we would just type in where you can copy and paste and save the criteria. You do the same thing with the exclusion. Recruitment, where you're going to find these people. Informed consent. So this is talking about, they want to see, the IRB wants to see how long the subjects have to consider participation in the trial. So we don't want somebody rolling into a pre-op area and you're handing them the consent, and when we look at the time that they arrived and the time of the consent, there's 5 minutes. That's not obtaining informed consent. So if you can do it and they can take it home, or if they're up on the floors and you're going to come back in an hour, so that should be all reflected here under informed consent. This section is, again, substituted consent, which is used, but it's not the norm, I should say. Patients who can't consent for themselves. Vulnerable subjects, and that gives you the different categories here. And are we paying these people? Investigator-initiated normally do not. Sponsored trials a lot of times have it included in their budget because they might be following them for 5 years and want them to come in every 2 weeks initially, and then monthly, and then annually after that. So, treatment for research-related injuries. If it's a sponsored trial, Barbara Cruz will have the contract. It should match the contract, the consent, and the application. Subject injury should be the same in all 3 places. Research methods and procedures, that's asking about the diaries, rating scales, surveys, things like that. We would just include what that is so the IRB knows to look for those attachments. General methods and procedures, then the summary. So this is where I would copy and paste exactly what's being done to the subjects during their participation. And what differs from standard of care? If this is a sponsored trial, a lot of times I get this information from the investigator directly. It'll also be in the budget, things that they pay for. Study duration again, your data analysis and statistical tests, and if you need help and you're the PI and it's your protocol, then you can reach out to Crystal or John for their assistance with writing this. How you're going to minimize the risk, because we want to make sure that the risks don't outweigh the benefits. And they talk about potential benefits, which doesn't have to be to the individual subject, but it can be for society. Then the risk to benefit ratio, proving that, you know, the risks are not greater than the benefits. Monitoring subject safety, what are you going to do to make sure that these people are not having any adverse events, or normally that's the frequency of the visits and different labs you might be doing, and how you're going to protect their privacy and confidentiality. This language is pretty much always the same in all the applications, talking about HIPAA compliant, and then that they'll be identified with a subject ID or a number and their initials, and that'll be in a link that'll be locked separate, and it'll be locked in the investigator's research office, and who will have access to it. They want to make sure that it's limited access. Okay, now if you have a drug study, you can click under here. You can check and see. Didn't pull up aspirin. Should be in here. This drug study the drug section changed with the new, where a lot of them don't have the titles. Okay, there might be a little glitch in the system in this area, which will get straightened out this week. Working on it. But that's where you would upload here the information. They're going to ask you who is the manufacturer. Are you giving it to them at no cost? Is it FDA approved? Do you have an IND? If you said yes to this IND, then it would give you a box to put the IND number. A lot of times that'll be right on the first page of your protocol. And who holds the IND. Unusual dosage, frequency, etc. Change that. But see, it prompts you. If you don't fill out all the right boxes, it won't let you continue. So I have to change it back to no, save, and save and continue. Project information, this is talking about the different departments, as Amy had said. So if we're using Jackie and the research pharmacy, Carla Vogel, she'll issue the drug to the floor, the ER, or whatever, they're mixing it. We would check that they're involved. Cooper Clinical Lab, if you're not processing your own specimens, and say you're sending them out to a central lab, you can pay the Cooper Lab to process them. They need your protocol. Nursing, if nursing's going to do an administration of the medication. I've never used food and nutrition or clicked medical records. And then you're going to talk about how you're going to pay for anything extra. And normally that's billed to the grant or whatever funding you have. Will it increase their length of stay? Are you going to use the hospital staff? Are you going to involve blood banking or tissue specimens? If this is a yes, it'll lead to a whole other page talking about tissue banking. You'll need to complete that as well. So that's another area where it'll change the routing of your form. And then is there a DSMB? This section here, does it involve exposure to radiation? So then you would send that to Ed Goldschmidt. He is the head of the Radiation Safety Committee. You'd send him your protocol to look over if it's greater than the risk of radiation. That way he can look at it while the IRB is looking at it, and then he can type a little blurb, and we'll include that to send to the IRB. Make sure to show that our patients are protected. Okay, and then I don't know if everybody's familiar with clinicaltrials.gov. These are sponsored trials where it's a database of federal FDA-regulated trials. You can plug in the title under that section, and it'll show up maybe your trial, and it might show, you know, Dr. Smith down in North Carolina. It'll show all the different sites that are doing it and who the sponsor is. Subjects. This is normally your major inclusion criteria that would go here. Are they inpatients, outpatients, is anybody deceased? Then this section also is to like prompt you to think in who you might need to route it to. Are they going to be identified through the ER? And it says Brig Bowman, but it's not. It's Chris Jones. And the ICU, then you'll click off for Treziak. Advertising has to go to Jill Lawler, I guess for creation. But if you already have it completed, you'd upload it here. This is letting them know to look for that attachment. And you need to look at medical records first to see if we have the potential subjects. Are you going to be getting informed consent? And are you going to obtain documentation? So you'll have them sign the consent. These should be yes if you're obtaining consent. The verbally, I don't see all that often. And do you obtain, it's like very redundant, the consent. Are you going to get consent? Are you going to get documentation of consent? And do you obtain document of consent? So, and then you need to list who is going to obtain informed consent. If it's a treatment trial, an interventional trial, it can only be a physician. Database studies, probably prospective database studies, you might have a PA or an LPN in the office, then they could obtain consent. And you need to list everybody over there. Data sets, I've never checked yes on any of these. So I really can't elaborate on data sets. Normally I just click no, 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 and save and continue. There's our application. It's all done. Woo-hoo. Save and continue. Now this is where we're going to put our attachments. So if you have a folder with all your documents in it, It's very clear. Put your protocol here. Grant proposal, say you got a Cooper Foundation grant, you want to include that here. If you have a drug study, you'll have a 1572 and an investigator brochure. Otherwise, you can include, if it's over-the-counter medication or FDA-approved medications, you can put package inserts here. So aspirin versus Plavix, you would upload them here. This is the DSMB, which is a data safety monitoring board that is on many of the sponsored trials, not all of them. They review all the serious adverse events. Here's where you put Ed Goldschmidt's letter saying it's okay to do this study. He doesn't see any real danger. And biosafety would be for equipment, anything new. I know we had a 3D mammography machine out in Voorhees. So we got biosafety to inspect it, and that's where this went. Over here, you're going to put your questionnaires, diaries, or tests. Here, you're going to include your informed consent. You would click to add a new consent. I've never done it with the list of informed consent template documents. I use the template, but then I save it, and it's, so I would normally add informed consent from one that I already did. So I would have that completed prior to doing the application if I wanted to kind of cruise through it. And here you would give, your title. Normally there's a browse button, maybe because we're not at Cooper. It would show me to look on my desktop, and then I could find my file there with the date. It requires that you put a language in, and it requires that you have a description, otherwise it won't let you continue.
The browse is choose document. It was on there.
Okay. This would be any brochures or whatever that you have in the waiting room. Bear with me, we're almost done. And any additional information. Anything that wasn't captured in any of those categories, you could put here if you think it's important to be reviewed. Okay, now it kind of prompts you to do the submission. It gives you the correct names here of the people. So it's the chief of your department. So then I would click here. And I already warned the doctor. I said, don't sign off on anything. So here I want to click yes to route it to additional personnel. Anybody you uploaded in the beginning part of the application shows up here. I would just go ahead and click everybody off, and you save and continue. That will route it to them, but not until this screen is done. So this is where you put your chiefs and Jackie. So pick Dr. Dellinger, save, and then put chief of department, save and continue. Have I completed all my signatures? I see everybody's here. This is the next screen that comes up. This is everything that was included, all the different inserts. It has the application and all the inserts. If you forgot anything, you can go back from there and add it in. Because once you sign off, it'll be routed. So I'm going to click approve. And here it is. It's being routed right now. So then you would sign off. This was me. It used to route directly. Oh, no, I did sign off. Had check mark means signed off. Sorry. Getting used to the new. Any of these means it's pending. And, yeah, everybody's going to get it. Once all the coordinators and physicians get it, that's when it'll go to Jackie, Dellinger, you know, the higher-ups. Everybody else has to sign off. So hopefully you included everybody, and you don't want to pull anybody off, because once these are all signed and it's, you know, being routed, and you say, oh, I want to remove Amanda Logan, you have to retract this whole submission, and anybody who signed off has to sign off all over again. So, and that's it. Anybody have any questions? I'm going to retract this real quick. So if you want to retract it, just hit the retract button. And it goes from pending, submitted, that orange colored box over here, to blue, which is your draft. Any questions? You got my name in the back of the packet. If you have any questions, email me. It's Rickette-Chris, or you can look me up at the phone log, and happy submitting.
If anybody wants to, does anybody want to hear about what some of the common mistakes are that we see often in the application, the submissions? If not, that's okay.
I could show you the financial disclosure real quick. It's right here on the screen. See if it works. Here. Over here, we just add a new form. It's already loaded with the information from your application, the funding, the start date. I would put it as today when you're signing off. Research, sign and submit. Why isn't it going? Detected a change. Okay, it's because I didn't do the submission, but anyway, that's where you come up and you'll get 3 boxes. Your interest, your spouse's interest, and your child's interest. You have to, even if you don't have a spouse or children, you need to click all 3 off. Well, what's the 4th one? Is all.
One is if you have an interest.
Yeah. Okay, that's it. Thank you for coming. Okay, Harry, we good? All right.
So some of the common mistakes that we see when the submissions come in is that sign-offs were not routed to all of the people that are on the study application. So everybody that's listed needs to sign off. Anybody from each of the different departments, their department chief needs to sign off. That is one that automatically, you know, we kick it back. And we just had a big issue where we tried to be nice and accept some of those things through the process, and it really messed everything up. So we're not going to do that anymore. So make sure you have your sign-offs. Make sure that it's routed to everybody. You want to make sure that if there's any faculty advisors, that they're also signing off as well. If you are doing a chart review, we asked you to identify the benefits and the risks that are related to the research in the study application. So one of the risks related to chart reviews is that there's a breach of confidentiality. And so that's something that's often missed. Not a big thing, but it is something that you want to make sure that you're including in your study application. If you're doing a chart review, make sure, and it's a retrospective chart review, make sure that you're identifying the month, the day, and the year of the dates of the charts that you would like to look at. And make sure that it's retrospective if you're telling us it's retrospective. If you can do retrospective, you can do prospective. But for prospective, we're going to expect that you're obtaining consent from those subjects unless you have a really good reason not to obtain consent from those subjects, okay? So make sure that the dates that you're putting in your study application are before the time that you're submitting to the IRB. It can't just say, you know, a date to present, because we want a date in the study application. Because when we go back and look at that in a year, we're going to say, well, what was present? Okay. Let's see, what are some of the other things? If you're requesting a waiver of consent or a waiver for HIPAA authorization, make sure that you're justifying why it would be appropriate to grant a waiver for those different types of things. Generally, for a retrospective chart review, the waiver is justifiable. There are some other cases where it's justifiable to waive consent and HIPAA authorization, but you want to make sure that you're telling us why you think that it's appropriate so that we have that completed in the application. Again, make sure that there's consistency across the different documents that are submitted to us, and make sure that that everything is completely checked off and all of your documents are attached. If you tell us you're going to obtain consent, there's no consent form attached, well, then we need the consent form. That's pretty much it. Any other questions? FDs have to be done. We talked about that. Yep. That gets held up sometimes. We won't put anything on the agenda if we don't have FDs. It can't go to a reviewer before we have FDs. And then oftentimes, like I said before, people will get confused about routing FDs at an initial submission versus an amendment, and you can't route FDs for an amendment until the IRB processes the submission and sends out that notification to the study team so that you guys know that you can route that FD. Yeah, I mean, answering the appropriate questions so that it branches correctly, that's another thing. Answering all of the sections, so I know that we're having some issues with the drug section at this point as a result of the upgrade. But you know, we have things where people will leave sections blank, or you know, they're not attaching the 1572 or the IBs or the package inserts, and that just holds up the process because you know, we try really hard to pre-screen it and get it out as quickly as possible, and it just you know, kind of holds up everything because we don't have those documents to review, so we have to stop, we have to send it back, wait for it to come back in, and basically start all over again. So that's, and then, you know, I really encourage you to have somebody else review the work before you submit it to us because, like I said, you know, even when I write, I think it makes sense, I have somebody else read it, and, you know, there might be a sentence or two that throws the whole thing off and really takes away from the work that I've created. And really, as you're creating the submission, the more work you put into it up front, it will lessen your work as you go through the process. It's also creating a template that you can basically use for your manuscript if you're looking to submit to a journal, right? So if you do a really good job on the front end of things, then it sets you up to be in a good place, and it's less likely that it's going to need to come back for with stipulations. So that's pretty much all I have.
I'd like to clarify one thing. When you first started, in terms of key study personnel, if you're using a phlebotomist to take a blood sample that's not standard of care, that person is not considered a key study personnel. So the people that are really an integral part of the study or doing the research, doing the analysis. Obviously, if you have a research coordinator who's going to be involved in the study, who's drawing the blood, that's a different story. But you can use nurses, you can use the other healthcare providers that we have here, and allied health professionals. They don't necessarily have to be part of the study, and they don't need to get the financial disclosure form and all that.
And there's guidance documents that you can search for from the Office of Human Research Protections on who is engaged in research, and that clearly outlines, you know, for example, if you're utilizing somebody for a service, then they would not necessarily be engaged in the research. They wouldn't need to be listed on the study application, and you wouldn't need to, you know, have sign-offs or do FDs or anything like that. So, but the IRB office can help you with that if you need to get clarification about who's engaged in research, but you can also reference that document as well. Okay, thank you.